Does full frame even matter? That is the big question for today, and let's find out. Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Aryan, and today we're talking all about full frame. So if you're in the market for a brand new camera and you can't decide if you want to go full frame or a crop sensor, I hope this video can help you decide. There's a lot of information out there, not all of it's right, most of it's confusing. So I'm really hoping this video can help you make a better decision, for what's best for you. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. Alright, so first things first, what is full frame? Basically, full frame is the exact same size as an old school piece of 35mm film. So it would be 36mm by 24mm. That is basically the definition of full frame. 35mm film had its own look, its own characteristics, and that's basically what we're trying to recreate still to this day. That's why you see people taking their super clean images and overlaying them with like film grain. We're all basically after the film look. We're trying to capture the essence of film without actually using film. That's basically the whole point in a nutshell. So if a full frame sensor is 36 by 24, a crop sensor would obviously be smaller than that. And there's no set dimensions for a crop sensor. They can all be different, and all of them have a different crop factor. So essentially you have full frame, and then crop sensor is of course smaller. So now that you know what a full frame sensor is, the rest of this video is going to be more of a technical analysis. I'm going to go over the daily benefits of using a full frame sensor, and I'm not really going to focus on like the theory side of things. That's not really my thing, so that's not what this video is about. So getting right into it, number one would be really amazing low light performance. So we just established that a full frame sensor is physically bigger than a crop sensor, and for low light what that means is that the sensor has more surface area to capture more light. So basically that gives you better performance at higher ISOs and overall a cleaner image in low light. So next up on the list would be the field of view. Now I'm gonna get a little bit technical here and tell you guys how lenses work. So let's say I have an 85mm lens. That 85mm is a physical characteristic of the lens itself. It has nothing to do with the camera body. No matter what, that will always be an 85mm lens. And when I throw it onto a full frame sensor, what it's doing is it's projecting an image onto the sensor that's a circle. All lenses project images that are circles, and what your sensor is doing is it's basically cropping in a rectangular shape from that circle, giving you your final result. So when you have a crop body, all you're doing is you're capturing a smaller section of that projection, and that's what gives it a more zoomed in look. And that crop factor is basically the ratio of how much smaller. That's where that comes into play. Now most crop sensor bodies have their ratio slightly different. Some are 1.5, some are 1.6 times. So that can vary from camera to camera, it just depends on which one you're planning to buy. But in theory, that is the whole concept of how you're capturing your image. Now at the other end of the table, when you're just looking at the back of your LCD screen, you just feel like you've zoomed in a little bit. But of course, we just learned that you haven't. You're just capturing a smaller section of the projection. So let's say if I'm trying to get a 16mm look on a crop sensor body that crops in by 1.6 times, then I have to go and buy a 10mm lens for it to get the same results as a 16mm lens on a full frame body. I really hope all of that made sense. If it didn't, I'm really sorry, but I think it made sense. So let's just take this frame as an example. I'm shooting on the Sony a7 III and I'm shooting at 35mm right now. So this is a full frame body shooting 35, and this is what 35 looks like. And if I was shooting on a crop body, it might look something like this. Now this is a lot closer to 50mm on a full frame body just because of the crop factor. That's essentially the difference between the two. A crop factor can be a huge deal for you if, let's say, you're somebody who likes to shoot landscapes and you love shooting wide, and now you gotta account for the crop factor all the time. So that can be a bit of an annoyance, so that's something to keep in mind. Now another difference a crop sensor body makes is in the amount of background blur, or bokeh. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but that's like the only way I've learned how, so don't judge me. The amount of background blur just goes back to the crop factor, and I'll explain how. So let's say if you're on a crop body and you're shooting 24mm, that would be a full frame equivalent of a 35, around there. So I have to stand in a certain position, further away from the camera to get my framing because I'm zoomed in just a little bit, or cropped in if you will. So that basically makes my depth of field deeper. More stuff is in focus because I'm physically moving away from the lens. That's just how it works. Let's say if I was to hold this battery up to the lens, I would go out of focus because something closer is in focus. That's just how lenses work. Now on the other side, if I put a 24mm lens on a full frame body, all of a sudden my shot is super wide compared to the crop sensor, because again, there is no crop factor. So if I want to get similar framing, for myself in the shot, I can do one of two things. I can either physically move closer, which would, create more separation from me and the background, giving me more background blur, or I can just zoom into a 35mm, which compresses the lens and gives me more background blur. So the end result always is more background blur. It's basically as simple as this. If I want similar framing out of a full frame camera and a crop sensor camera, I will always have more background blur in the full frame camera. It's as simple as that. So now that you know a full frame sensor will let you shoot better in low light, it will let you shoot wider, and it will give you more out of focus elements, now let's talk about some of the cons. And the number one and the biggest one being the price. Basically, you have a bigger sensor. It's just gonna be more expensive to make, thus making the cameras more expensive to buy. That's simple as that. Something that's bigger is gonna cost more. That's about it. And same thing goes for lenses itself, because camera manufacturers have to put more glass in the lens to make that circle projection big enough for a full frame camera to capture it. More glass equals higher price tag. There's simply no way around it. They just go hand in hand. Bigger sensor, higher price tag. Con number two for full frame sensors would be portability. Again, bigger sensors, bigger bodies, bigger lenses, heavier lenses. So if ultimately, traveling light is your number one thing, then maybe full frame isn't for you. Try micro four thirds, try APS-C. Those crop bodies are just gonna work better for you because they're gonna be lighter. So last on the list of cons, and honestly this is not even a con for full frame, this is more of a pro for crop sensor bodies, and that would be, again, the crop factor. And if you're shooting something that really requires you to be zoomed in all the time, let's say like sports or wildlife, then getting a crop sensor body is a very smart idea, because all of a sudden you're increasing the range of your lens. If you bought a 200mm, all of a sudden that's closer to a 300, and that can help you get some of those shots that you couldn't before. So that's just a more of a pro for the crop sensor bodies. And if you're shooting telephoto all the time, then maybe a crop sensor would be a smart idea for you. So to answer the big question, does full frame even matter? And I would say yes. To the right person, it definitely matters. So somebody like me, I shoot a lot of weddings and I do some narrative work. For me, full frame is almost an absolute must. I shoot a lot of low light stuff for weddings, receptions are super dark, so there full frame helps me out all the time. I know I'm getting the best possible results I can get out of a sensor because my sensor is a full frame sensor. And for the narrative work that I do, I'm basically trying to replicate the look and feel of a movie, so having a full frame sensor would definitely be a great place to start. So what about the other stuff? What if you're just a hobbyist? What if you just picked up a camera, or you're shooting sports, or something of that nature? What about then? Then I think honestly it doesn't matter too much. I mean, at the end of the day, it does come down to personal preference, and I recommend you rent out a APS-C and a full frame camera and give it a shot. But to be very honest, if you're okay with not the most amount of background blur and just doing a little bit of math with the crop factor, it honestly doesn't matter too much. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with crop sensor bodies. So don't feel like you're investing in cheaper sensors. It's the exact same sensor, it's just smaller. You're getting the same image, you're just looking at a smaller section of it. So no, at the end of the day, full frame doesn't give you a more professional look. I just think it gives you a more filmic look, which some people might link those two together, but I can guarantee you it's not the same thing. If you're just trying to do some client work with commercials and you have proper lighting all the time, then honestly it doesn't matter, because you have full control over the set, and you can put whatever lens in front of your camera and you can be as far away or as close to the subject as possible. So it doesn't matter, you will get great quality results with the crop body. So don't think that you can't produce professional videos just because you don't have a full frame camera. You can make great videos with any camera that you have. Basically, it boils down to how you use the stuff you have. You basically have to push everything to the limits and get the most out of your camera, your sensor, your lenses, and all of your gear. Alright guys, that was it for me today. If you found this video helpful, a like would be much appreciated. Subscribe for more videos like this and don't forget to hit the bell. And yeah, that's it for me. I'll see you guys next time.